In this episode, we'll be taking a look at the American Lock Series 1100 padlock. Hey folks, welcome to Pugs Picks Locks. If you're new here, feel free to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you'll always be notified when I release new content like this. And if you like the video, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. Click that like button and then drop a comment or question down below. I don't always get everything right, so if you have feedback for me, did I get something wrong? Is there something I could do better? Do you have advice for me? I'd love to hear it, and I'd love to hear your questions. And I'll do my absolute best to answer any questions you may have. Okay, in this episode, we're going to be taking a look at the American Lock Series 1100 padlock that you see before you. And this lock, the Series 1100 lock, is a milestone lock for many of us. And the reason why it's such a milestone is because the combination of spool pins, serrated pins, and weak springs make it an incredibly challenging lock to pick. A whole lot of fun, a whole lot of frustration, and then when you finally get it and you get that open, a whole lot of satisfaction. Okay, so I did a previous episode all about spool pins, and so you might want to go take a look at that. I explain what spool pins are, how they work, and how to overcome them. And then the other type of security pin within these locks is called a serrated pin. And I'm going to throw a diagram on the screen. And you can see that each one of the serrations can catch in the shear line of the lock and kind of give a click. You can imagine how that would give a click as it passes, each one of the serrations passes the shear line, which kind of makes you think you might have set it. But we're going to talk about what that feels like inside the lock and as we pick our way through it. And then the third security feature, the weak springs in the pin stack. The weak springs can make it incredibly easy to overset pins. And because the normal amount of pressure that you're used to applying to a pin to set it, all of a sudden becomes very too much pressure on the weak spring, and then you end up oversetting that pin. And we'll talk more about how that feels as we pick through the lock also. Okay, so let's start with demonstrating that this is in fact a working, functional American lock. This is the key that came with this particular one, with the bidding code on the back, if you can see that. And we're going to demonstrate that this is not a lock that I've pulled the core and replaced, pulled out all the pins, and then I'm going to pretend to pick it and all that kind of good stuff. So, working, functional 1100 series lock. We're going to tackle this with top of the keyway tension. And you may recall from previous videos that I prefer bottom of the keyway tension. And one of the reasons why I prefer bottom of the keyway tension is whenever I do top of the keyway, I tend to somehow pop the tension wrench out of the keyway as I'm trying to pick the lock. So if you folks have any advice on how to avoid doing that, I am more than welcome. I more than welcome your comments and any feedback and advice you may have for me. Okay, so top of the keyway tension with a 0.06 of an inch pry bar. It's a generic pry bar, top of the keyway pry bar that I've had forever. I don't recall where I got it from. It was one of a set, but this one is 0.06 of an inch. And I tend to use the thickest, stiffest tension tool that I can in any lock because you get the most feedback, or I get the most feedback from it. From a stiffer tension wrench. The reason why I'm using top of the keyway, even though I prefer bottom of the keyway, is because this standard short hook from Southord is the tool that I'm going to be using. is the pick that I'm going to be using to single pin pick this. And you can see that it's a bit thicker and beefier than, say, the Pagoda hook that is my preferred single pin picking tool. And I have to have a thicker, beefier tool because I have to crank on some of the pins in this lock, and the thinner tools just bend and flex too much. And you can see that if I had a tension wrench in the bottom of the keyway, it would not leave a lot of room to maneuver this particular pick. All right. I tend to pick locks starting at the back of the lock with pin 5 or whatever the deepest pin is, and then I work my way to the front. Other people start at the front of the lock with pin 1, and then they work their way back. There's no right or wrong here. It just is a matter of personal preference. This is the way I have always done it, so this is the way I'm going to do it. So I start with the tool in the back of the lock, and then I pull it forward until it catches on the last pin. And that's pin 5. And I'm going to go with medium-ish towards light, kind of light medium tension. And I got a click out of 5, but it then slid all the way up into the Bible of the lock with almost no resistance. That tells me two things. Number one, it tells me that that pin was not really binding, and that click actually might mean that it's a spool pin or something that was catching on the lip of the shear line. The fact that it slid all the way up into the Bible tells me that it's a weak spring. That it had zero resistance. It tells me that it's a weak spring and that the pin wasn't really binding. So I'm going to go to pin 4, and I got a nice click out of 4. I'm going to go to pin 3. Okay, and I got a couple of clicks. I don't know if you heard it. It sounded more like a crunch than a single click. And that's because there are a couple of clicks that happen in there, 2, maybe 3 clicks that happen really close together, giving that crunchy sound. And that crunchy sound, and you can definitely feel it in the pick and in the tension tool when it sets like that. That crunchy feeling is one of the indicators that it might be a serrated pin, because several serrations might be passing through the shear line quickly together, so it kind of goes, makes that crunch noise. Okay, I'm gonna go to pin 2, and I got a nice solid click out of, almost a thunk out of pin 2, and now pin 1. Got a click out of 1, 2 clicks out of 1, and a deep set. And the tension tool almost popped out of the lock, so I just put it back in. So a very deep false set. So that means it's time to go hunting for our spool pin, right? And I told you before that 5 felt like it might have been a spool pin where one of the flanges was caught on the shear line, which gave it that click before it just slid all the way up into the Bible. So 1 feels set, 2 feels set, 3 feels set, and 4 feels set. And that leaves us 5. And 5 is now all the way in the keyway again. It's all the way in the core again. And it is binding. And it's giving me counter rotation. And so that is definitely our spool. And because it has a weak spring, there's a chance of oversetting it, an increased chance of oversetting it. So what I'm doing is I'm very gently bouncing. Okay, it overset. I was bouncing the tension as I was trying to set it very gently to try to catch it right before it overset. But since that didn't work, I'm going to go the other direction. I'm going to bounce it as I gently remove pressure with the pick. And there, we got our open. So by bouncing it as I was gently removing the pressure with the pick, that allowed it to drop back into the keyway, but leave the driver pin above the shear line. And there's our open. And there's our celebratory swivel. Okay. One other thing I wanted to show you. You can see that that the core is still turned horizontally. And so when I lock this back up, you're going to see the core spin 180 degrees. And so it's still horizontal instead of being back at its vertical starting position. The first time I did this, I thought that I had bricked this lock, made it as useful as a brick. Because you can see if we try to tension this lock now, I put in my tension tool and I try to tension it, and the tension tool is now catching on that ward right there. And it won't turn. The core will not turn. So therefore I cannot tension it. But don't worry, you have not in fact bricked your fancy American 1100 series lock. All you need to do is just get the tension tool right in the middle of the keyway and just turn it, and voila. Now it's reset and ready to be picked again. Okay, so that was the American lock Series 1100 padlock, opened with top of the keyway tension, a 6/100th of an inch pry bar, top of the keyway pry bar, and a standard short hook from Southord. Hey folks, thanks for watching. If you liked the video, remember to drop a like and leave a comment or a question below. If you're new here, subscribe and ring the notification bell for more content like this. Until the next video, happy picking y'all.